Hey folks, glad you could join us on another episode of Business Redefined. This is your weekly, most comprehensive look at the world of business, finance, and economics. We are at the Revenue Authority discussing matters tax collection and revenue mobilization, especially on the back of the amendments we saw coming in courtesy of the Tax Laws Amendment Act of 24 and the Tax Procedures Amendment Act of 2024. We are privileged to have the Commissioner in charge of large and medium-sized taxpayers, Madam Rispa Simiyu. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you for having me.
Karibu sana on set.
Asante.
Rispa, let's start with some review here. So we had a glance of the half-year numbers for FY 24-25. From the indications we're getting from the National Treasury is that we could have a bit of lethargy in the indirect taxes, specifically VAT collections. Treasury CS indicates we missed target by about 37 billion shillings. What's at play here, Rispa? And do you have a sense that indirect could be punching below capacity?
Thank you, Julian. Let me start by saying something I usually say, that VAT is that one tax head that everybody should pay, including a small child, as long as whatever they are consuming is not exempt. So everybody should pay VAT. Secondly, VAT, our expectations are VAT should be the best performing tax head. Truth be told, we are not there yet. Can we get there? Yes. So how did we do for the first half? For the first half, our collections were 170.8 billion as against a target of 178.83 billion. That's a deficit of about 7.96 billion and not the 37B as we have had. So looking at it largely, that was a performance of 96%. Could we do 100 and more? Yes. Is 96 bad? I don't think so. Now, what are the things that have helped us along the way? You see, if we're saying the first half was 96%, January was 102%.
So you outperformed?
We outperformed.
Yeah.
February came down to 96%. And so we saw an upward trend right from November, and this can be attributed to solutions like the auto-populated VAT return. Yeah. Now, even for the first half, there was a slow start, and mainly because of the protests against the finance bill. Yeah, that caused delays. That also postponed the effective date even for the Finance Act. So there was quite a bit happening there. Quite a number of industries had a slow start, especially in that whole space. So with the auto-populated return, which was rolled out in November, for the December return, December actually did 103%. I would say in this year, this financial year, that was the highest performance. Like I said, January, 102. February, 96. We are sort of seeing a downward trend now. And that is what we're analyzing now. But one of the things we can actually attribute that to is that at the onset, like any other system, there will be hiccups, teething problems. So there are people who probably did not claim their rightful share of the input tax. And we believe with that, at some point, it will stabilize.
All right.
Yeah.
So clearly, the start could have been lethargic, but we're seeing a build-up in momentum.
Precisely.
All right. Still on the subject of VAT, one of the key changes we saw coming in courtesy of the Tax Procedures Amendment Act of 24 was the provision for reverse invoicing. And of course, this was to try and address the issue of compliance, especially among the small players in the tax bracket. So the question here is, I am reliably informed, and I've spoken to two particular players in the tea sector and in the macadamia sector, and they're telling me farmers still insist that if we don't want this issue of reverse invoicing, we will just find the next cash purchaser and they're available. One is, what are the teething issues here? Is KRA aware of this, and what are you doing about it? Rispa.
Good question, Julians. We have looked at that issue from various angles. Sometimes we ask ourselves, is it fear of the unknown? Is it an issue of knowledge, creating awareness? Is it just not wanting to comply? Well, what really is the issue? Now, if you go back even to when we started the rollout for e-Teams, we started with Teams back in 2000.
Yeah.
And then we had the regulations, and then 3 years later, we introduced, actually Teams was fully rolled out, and then immediately thereafter, e-Teams. Now with all this is because we are listening to what the taxpayer is saying. because I strongly believe a number of taxpayers want to comply. But there are two challenges. One, there are those who feel, why am I paying? I might as well keep my money to myself. Others are saying, I want to pay, but this thing is too complicated. Three, others are saying, I want to comply, but it is too expensive. Now, those are the voices we were listening to, and at every step of the way, we said, okay, we started with Teams, which required a device. Requiring a device means you have to spend on that hardware. So we quickly moved into eTeams. eTeams software base, even what we call the Mlikamwizi, the feature phone, can actually access eTeams. So back to the farmers, and not just farmers. I would actually just categorize them generally as micro and small taxpayers. This is a lot of people that has very unique needs. Some it could be just access to technology. Some it could be just an understanding of how it works. And that is why we have rolled out subsequently various solutions for this lot of people. Now, going specifically to your question, you've asked about macadamia farmers, you've asked about tea farmers. At some point, if you recall, there was hue and cry from avocado farmers, where we even went to Muranga, we went to Thika, we tried talking to these farmers to explain to them that the introduction of eTeams is not an additional tax. It's a way of building efficiencies in what they do, creating visibility, bringing fairness and equity to that process. So, from where we sit, we are of the view that, strictly speaking, and from an honest perspective, everybody should be on eTeams. And being on eTeams does not necessarily mean you're paying VAT. It is just also to ensure, because this small farmer, at one point, they would want to grow. Let me simplify it even further. Take an example of any hotel, established hotel in Nairobi, and allow me even at this point to use probably Radisson Blue. They make vegetables, they make, and these vegetables are sold by what we loosely call Mama Mboga. This Mama Mboga has a stall. One day Mama Mboga wants to move from a bench, where she just lays out her mbogas, to a nice smaller, yes. And then eventually maybe to a concrete brick and mortar where she can actually on-sell to Radisson. But now when she sells to Radisson, Radisson will want an eTeams compliant invoice. How does she get there? The only way, one, what's in it for her? Growth. Two, visibility. Three, she's able also to transact without restrictions to any of these Radissons and the like. So for us, there is that bit. Then secondly, remember, once you're on eTeams, it means you also don't need to go the step of document registry, because everything is online. And also for the larger taxpayers, what they see on eTeams is what we see. So yes, we are aware that that is happening. We are aware of the misconception of what eTeams is, what it does. And maybe I can say this without fear of contradiction, sometimes it's just different voices speaking to these taxpayers. Different voices that are not speaking the same language. Because the truth is, there is no additional tax. If anything, what's in it for them, it is efficiency, is ease of compliance. And then when you're doing what you're expected to do, you have no fear of KRA coming tomorrow, or anyone coming to say, we are now enforcing because you're not collecting. Now, initially when this conversation began, it began with, oh, I don't have access to internet, I don't have a smartphone. That story has since died, because even a feature phone can access. So yes, I think there's misconception. I think it's lack of awareness. And in that space, I think we are doing quite a bit, probably not enough. But for us as KRA, the position we have taken is listen and listen more. Come to us and tell us, what are your challenges? Further, we are also engaging with cooperatives, partnering with other institutions. Cooperatives, where are these people? How are they grouped? What are these groupings that we can go to them? Is it Juakali sector? Is it a farmers association? Is it cooperatives? How can we get to them? And of course, through media like yourselves, these platforms, we do hope that the message will get to them that eTeams is not an additional tax. It's just trying to build efficiencies, create visibility, bring fairness and equity to the whole process, end to end, and to ensure that the whole ecosystem is visible to all.
So you're streamlining any kinks that are emerging progressively on the eTeam system. But, Rispan, we've had this chat before. Help me understand. Reverse invoicing, buyer-initiated invoicing.
Okay, thank you, Julians. Now, buyer-initiated invoicing and reverse invoicing. When we started on this journey, again, of Teams and eTeams, which have actually clearly laid out, Teams was device-based. We listened to the noise. We listened to the concerns and the challenges, and we moved into eTeams. Now, whereas we made the assumption probably at the onset that we have ticked that box, all is well, all is onboarded, we realized different segments of taxpayers have unique challenges, and challenges are unique to them. Not everyone has a smartphone, much as the phone penetration in Kenya, I would say, compared to many other countries, is amazing. Now, what is buyer-initiated? What do these things have in common? So, looking at the buyer-initiated invoicing, this is an invoice. Okay, if you look at both of them, let me start with what is common between these two. In both instances, the buyer can raise an invoice on behalf of the seller.
Correct.
For both. So that is the starting point. Now, the second item, what is key to note in this case is that it gives, both of them give KRA visibility, transparency, and traceability of the transactions. What is the difference between these two? With the in the buyer-initiated invoicing, the buyer provides transactional details to the seller. What are these details? Their name, their ID, their mobile number, the nature of the supply, whatever is being bought, the unit, the pricing, and the quantity.
Yeah.
Now, this can be done via USSD, *222#.
Yeah.
It can also be done on the eTeams, eCitizen portal. Now, when the buyer does that, then the seller is given the opportunity to either approve or reject.
Yes.
If it is approved, then it means that invoice has been raised. Now, remember, strictly speaking, traditionally, it is the seller that issues the invoice. But you have the seller, and even using the example that you gave of the farmer, comes and says, I have this macadamia, I have this avocados, I have whatever, and I am selling to this shop. So that is the process. So the buyer provides the details, the seller approves. Now, that is a buyer initiated. When you come to the reverse invoicing, and it is important that I state at this point, the reverse invoicing at this point, much as it is, we are headed there, it is a little bit of work in progress. We are still in the testing environment. But what the reverse invoicing has, different from the buyer-initiated invoicing, is it is an eTeams, it's a system-to-system integration. So it needs an established sort of system, and we have to pre-approve that system to see that the eTeams system can actually integrate with the reverse invoicing. But bottom line is, the end game is that the seller gets the invoice that has been generated
Yes.
by the buyer. So that is a common. So you'll see one is system to system, the other one via USSD, via eCitizen.
I see.
Yeah.
Having said that, Commissioner, in the public participation of the Tax Procedures Amendment Act, one of my submissions was, why don't we just go back and look at Section 16(1)(c) of the Income Tax Act? It spells that the only admissible invoice for deductibility purposes will be eTeams generated, right? Why can't we revise that and stagger out this thing? Because clearly there are still kinks which need to be straightened out based on the compliance that we are seeing on the ground. Would that be a route, Commissioner?
When you say stagger,
We can start with the large players who sit under your docket.
good point, but when you say stagger, it depends with the lens that you're looking at it. This journey started in 2000, Julius.
So either way, it's been staggered.
Thank you. Whether we liked it or not, it has been staggered, inevitably. We started this journey in 2000. with the regulations, sensitizing, speaking to people, saying we are moving now into the electronic invoicing ecosystem. And many countries have gone before us, even countries that have smaller economies than Kenya. So this journey started in 2000. 3 years later, 2023, is when all these introductions of now e-teams, remember it has already been staggered. And that's why I said it depends from which side you look at. Are you looking at a glass half full or a glass half empty? Yeah. It depends with the lens you have. Is my lens to make it bigger or slightly bigger? So now, it reaches a point where, regardless of how you define staggering, a line has to be drawn such that there's end-to-end fairness, there's end-to-end visibility of the ecosystem. And I'll tell you, this links into processes or operations of KRA, because a taxpayer will complain and say, you're asking me for these invoices, you're asking me for X, Y, and Z. When you come to audit, you're asking for all these documents. And we're saying, by the way, we found a solution how we can help you. If all these things, all these invoices are e-teams generated, if all your expenses are supported by e-teams, what you're seeing is what I'm saying. I will actually have no leg to stand on to come to you and tell you, can you give me your invoices again? Because the expectation is that if all those have been transmitted on the system, I can see what you're seeing. Yeah. So that is my starting point. That staggering has happened over time. Section 16(1)(c) talks about deductibility. Correct. And when we started with this process, and that's why we went into reverse invoicing, we went into the USSD option, we went into e-citizen portal, basically saying, we want to help. We want you to comply. Yeah. Thirdly, remember, even in my docket of LMT, LMT does not transact with itself.
They're small players.
They're small players. And these small players, by the way, these small players are the ones who feed into, the small players are the ones who have made LMT what it is. Yeah. Okay? So it means even these small players, remember for LMT, even if we stagger LMT, take an example of large taxpayers. Large taxpayers want to support their invoices. How will they support their invoices if the small taxpayer does not give them?
Yeah.
So even if you say stagger, you're staggering for who? Where do you start with the staggering? Because it means this small one has to give an appropriate invoice, a compliant invoice to the large one. Yeah. The small taxpayer is dealing with public sector. Are they not supplying to the public sector?
They are.
Remember, LMT, large and medium taxpayers, is LTO, it is MTO, it is public sector.
Yeah.
Who is supplying? It is not necessarily large taxpayers. It is not necessarily medium. It is a micro and small. Because what is the government doing? Government is trying to promote everyone's business. And they cannot say, we will transact with LMT and not so. I believe in all this, I've answered your question in a way.
On why we should not stagger.
And why, not why we should not stagger. First, I said we have staggered.
Over time.
Over time. So it depends on how you look at it. Secondly, why it is critical that we are all on the same platform. And what we should be addressing is the how. Okay. And that is the answer we have continued answering. When the small taxpayer comes and says, you have created the system for large, for media.
You find a solution for...
We find a solution for you.
Okay. In case you're lost, LTO is Large Taxpayers Office, MTO is Medium-Sized Taxpayers Office. You know, the commissioner here might assume that we all know these things, but we don't. Final question on matters e-teams. I read the Tax Procedures Act and I wonder whether there is conflict here. One, the Tax Procedures Act, Section 23 provides all businesses, the word is all, Rispa, will issue e-teams generated invoices. Then we have created a threshold, yeah? And I always wonder if small businesses are transacting among themselves and they wish to claim. Remember, we have a threshold.
Yes.
How does that work? And I know the argument has been thrown around that small businesses, after all, don't even focus on this issue of deductible expenses. But there are those who might want to. Yeah. How do you navigate that, Rispa?
It's a good question. I cannot say I have a straight answer. But one of the things we are banking on, like any other, not even Kenyan, any human being, anyone wants their business to grow. I don't think anyone wants to remain down there. Everyone wants their business to grow. And then secondly, everyone wants to comply. And we strongly believe that. Even if There are those ones who would be very happy cutting corners. I've said this and I've used this example before. I like this example to just reassure Kenyans that not everyone is in the business of evading taxes. The example I use, I call it a pyramid. But think about a triangle. And then divide this triangle into 3 slots. There will be the top that will be the smaller one. The middle one is wider.
And the base.
The base is the widest.
Yeah.
The way I look at our taxpayers, the way I look at Kenyans generally, is that most of them in business are in that the widest base. What does that mean? Happy to comply. It is a civic duty. I want to comply. I will pay my taxes. Then there is this middle batch. Happy to comply, but require a nudge.
Yes.
That if you don't remind me,
I'm okay.
I am cool. I am okay. But when I see that email, 20th is fast approaching, yes. 9th is fast approaching, or after the due dates, by the way, you've not paid your taxes. Okay, quickly, I don't want maneno mingi, I want to pay. Then there is that small samosa up there. Small.
Yes.
If
or
you
just
visualize.
unwilling.
In fact, the way I describe those ones is can't pay, won't pay, catch me if you can. But you see how small they are. Yeah. So largely speaking, we are dealing with people who want to pay. Now, I want to throw in some statistics. Even in looking at VAT and this whole journey, VAT registered taxpayers. Now, historically, we have always had the threshold of 5 million, because I want to start there as I come to your question. We've always had a threshold of 5 million. And my understanding of this is the genesis is that we have come from an era where paperwork, business was largely paper-based, manual. So to make it less cumbersome, anyone with annual turnover of 5 million and above, then register for VAT. In our books, we had 253,000 VAT registered taxpayers. Of these ones, when we started the journey of e-teams, we started by targeting those ones because you're already complying with VAT. You're already registered. And so far, we are not where we want to be. So we have about 173 on board. That's about 69%. Now, with the rollout of teams, remember we wanted everybody to be in that ecosystem. We then onboarded non-VAT registered taxpayers. Yes. Our initial target was 661,000. Of those, we successfully onboarded 271, which is 41%.
Okay.
So overall, those who I would say largely compliant are 444,000, which is 49%. Yeah. Now, then came the Tax Laws Amendment Act. Remember, we have started from where we're saying it's largely manual. Makes sense to have the 5 million.
Yes.
But our proposal was for this fairness, and going back even to my earlier point, that large and medium taxpayers transact with everybody else in the ecosystem, then bring it on the same playing field. Let us all be on the same platform. Yes. We decided because now it is system-based, why can't we make it easy? So remove the threshold. To us, we thought it was a no-brainer. Of course, until 27th of December 2024, when the Tax Laws Amendment Act came.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that to us, honestly speaking, was a setback. Yeah, because we were of the view that with all these simplified solutions, we have listened, we have considered, we have answered in the affirmative. So when you remove this slot again, and of course then there's the requirement of e-teams compliant invoices, clearly it is a setback.
Yeah.
So what unfortunately that would do, not what was intended, is that any large taxpayer, any medium taxpayer, government in public sector will say, if you do not give me an e-teams compliant invoice, I'm sorry.
We're not doing business.
We are not doing business.
Yeah.
What that then means is you can only transact amongst yourselves, seemingly maybe not non-compliant, not I mean, not non-compliant because you are complying with the law as is.
Yeah.
But is that really the intended outcome? No.
Not quite.
So we do hope that as we continue creating this awareness and showing the taxpayers what's in it for them, because also there is that ease, which I think is a very big thing. We do hope that actually probably some amendments might come through that will work.
I see. We need a whole conversation separate on eTeam, so let me leave it at that, and
yes.
We'll progress to the next one.
Yes, yes.
The extension of the amnesty to 30th of June 2025, RISPA, we are targeting from what we have 30 billion. This is already Q1 is gone. How far are we?
I love to talk about the amnesty, Julians, simply because we, from a KRA standpoint, we are seeing those people who come and take and take some more. So the amnesty, the way we look at it is we are giving back, giving, and giving more. How? Our target we had the amnesty.
2024.
And whereas the uptake was because our target at that time was 50 million.
Yeah.
50 billion. But we achieved 51B. Could it have been better? Much better. I think there's that sense of we being who we are. We like last minute. We being who we are, we know that it will be
granted an extension.
Precisely. And as you've seen, even that's the same story that we've had even in the filing of the returns.
Correct.
Kenyans always, being who we are, we say, there's an extension that is coming, so we are good. Now, with the performance of that amnesty, there are many other challenges. It could be system challenges, many other taxpayers having disputes in the pipeline, and it was deemed fit that the same to be extended. The first one ran for 9 months, yes. September to June. This one, I would say 6 months, because much as it came into play 27th December 2024, but it's running up to 30th of June 2025. Yeah. But remember, it only applies to penalties, interest, and fines that existed pre-31st December 2023.
Correct. The base period was adjusted.
Base period was adjusted.
Yeah.
By a year. Now, what does that mean? As it is now, we have a target of 30 billion. I'm really happy to say, pleased to say that as at 7th of April 2025, we had already collected 10.9 billion out, as in from this amnesty. So we've collected principal tax of 10.9 billion. How much had we waived in penalties, interest, yes, and fines? 158.2 billion. That's not a small amount. What are we doing to facilitate taxpayers to even comply more? We know we are in April right now. We know, we get the sense, just like it happened in the last one. May will be very busy.
At the tail end.
June will even be very busy.
Yes.
So we are working amongst ourselves to ensure that we have more hands on deck to facilitate taxpayers whose applications come before the deadline. It is our hope and prayer that most come now, because sometimes with these system issues, you never know at what point the system might fail. You would never know at what point your process might be interrupted. So one, we are doing a lot of awareness creation. We are everywhere. Digital, we are in billboards. We are talking to anyone who cares to listen about amnesty. Two, we are targeting stakeholder engagements, sector-based, right? Industries. We've gone even to the system and even writing directly to taxpayers that from your ledger, this is what we are seeing. Yeah. Are you keen on taking advantage? We have gone to those who have disputes, saying, whereas we have this option of the alternative dispute resolution, take it, take advantage, come to the table, let us have this conversation. And more importantly, what's in it for you? Yeah. If you remember, with the provisions of waiver of penalties and interest that were nullified, you had to put in a whole justification of why you think you qualify for waiver. Mitigations, yeah? But now, as long as it is a penalty, interest, and fine pre-31st December 20, you don't have to explain.
You just apply for the waiver.
Pay, not even that.
Not even apply.
Where you don't have a principal, you don't have to apply. It's automatic.
Yes.
Where you have principal tax, either pay bullet We address that.
Or give a payment plan.
Or give a payment plan. But remember, the payment plan, that last payment must be in
30th June.
by 30th of June 2025 at midnight.
Here's a question, Rispa. You know, when we saw the performance of the 23-24 amnesty and it had really outperformed the target, many of us thought finally KRA has full visibility of the legacy large ticket size arrears. If you're telling us that we are already at 11B and the target is just 30 billion, would you say you have that visibility?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that more of those taxpayers now are on board. More have cleaned their ledger. And still, remember those ones who have penalties and interest, we already had visibility. Yeah? It's just that our debt portfolio was too big.
Yeah.
So apart from the fact that we are giving back, we have also managed our debt portfolio. And at the same time, also for the benefit of the taxpayer, and this I will say, and I will not fear to belabor the point, that when it comes to basics like tax compliance certificates, you see, when you're applying for a tax compliance certificate, what we would call a TCC, if you have no debt, it is automatic.
Yeah.
No intervention, no human, nothing. But when your debt ledger is clean, then it's a plus for the taxpayer. So it's it's a plus for both sides. So visibility was there in the sense that the debt existed. We could see it.
Yeah.
But now it's getting better. I know there is this other conversation of debt legacy.
And the transfer
Precisely.
to the new system.
Yes, that has come with its own challenges. But again, what we're saying is we are moving from the old system to the new, where at a click of a button, it is a one-stop shop. And we've given the taxpayers the opportunity to, again, clean shop. So I would say it is a plus to all of us on many fronts.
Now that you've touched on that issue of the migration from the legacy to the new system, I'm curious. I did anticipate that there would be so many disputes post 31st DEC 24 rather. How is it looking like?
I think maybe what we did differently looking back was that we notified the taxpayers of what we were doing. We gave a 6 months window saying, this is what we have pushed to you based on what the ledger is saying.
Yeah.
If you have any concerns, come to us. Good news is that very many taxpayers have come to us. Now, have we addressed all those issues? The honest position is that we required a workflow, basically a process, a system-based process, that once we receive this information, this is what we need to do. Now, in writing, that process has been made known to our teams, yeah? On what you need to do when a taxpayer brings the documents. But now it was just recently rolled out. So now we are at that point where now we are working almost on overdrive, because even with these ledger balances, they also feed into this amnesty.
Yes.
So it's also in our best interest, and of course the taxpayer, to ensure that all that is cleaned up. So I think maybe the window, the engagement, I think it's a place we did something differently, as opposed to doing it big bang like we have done on some of the solutions.
Rispa, I'm being told our time is running out, so let me quickly move to the next one. When the Tax Laws Amendment Act and the Tax Procedures Amendment Act of 24 came in, we were told that the target of additional revenue to be mobilized is 174.6 billion. The latest update we have is that has been revised downward to a staggering 45 billion shillings. And you wonder, did KRA look at the numbers and realize, oh, some tax heads will not perform the way we thought, given the amendments that we saw, or what could be at play here?
You have the answer. Indeed, probably some of the things we had hoped for, or some of the things coming through, were not anticipated, or if they were, maybe not to the quantum, the right quantum. So take an example of the levies. Affordable housing, shift contribution, 1.5 on gross, 2.75 on gross. Now, these ones previously, when you talked about NHIF, even the HL when it came, it was a relief, but now it's a deduction. So you can imagine 1.5 gross, 2.7.5 of gross as a deduction.
Yes.
When it's a deduction, it means less PAY.
True.
So it means that has already hit the PAY basket. Now, secondly, another very good thing, the exemption on withholding tax on pension. And if you remember, even when this was being talked about, it was to help pensioners.
Right.
You've seen the sob stories that the pensioners have experienced. So for us, I think when you look at it from a social perspective, it is a good thing. But then again, it has also had a negative impact on
There's
PO.
an opportunity cost there.
Exactly, opportunity cost. Thirdly, think about the excise. Previously, excise was on the volume. Now it is on alcohol content. Now the alcohol content, the ones who have the alcohol content higher is the distillers. You know, basically the importers, because that's where the ethanol has not been, converted into alcohol, and of course the alcohol content reducing. So that again is an opportunity cost. So whereas, yes, we thought initially it could have been over 170, I mean, the numbers have since come down, and as you've seen, maybe in supplementary too, that has been done to just because we are now alive to the fact that we might not collect as much as we had hoped to collect.
All right. Some two final quick questions. One is that we've seen some new developments around rental income tax by way of a system that is ETRIS, I think.
ERITS, yes.
ERITS,
E-R-I-T-S.
Yes, ERITS. Tell us more about it and what's the end game here?
Now, ERITS was unveiled and launched last week, Friday. The approach is actually to improve voluntary compliance, meaning anyone with property that attracts, as a rental income and attracts tax should voluntarily register, and of course then the rest follows, because right now we have MRI. If you recall, why did we go into MRI? To simplify the process. Now, it was 10% when we started. Subsequently, it was moved to 7.5%. What was the logic behind that? Hoping
You're roping more guys.
Did that happen? No. Instead, revenue dipped. So we're saying, okay, fine. Again, in the spirit of easing compliance, making compliance less costly, making it easy to comply, let us have the simplified solution where you come in, you've already been paying, continue onboarding. Again, visibility, transparency, accountability, name it. So that really is a process that we have begun. And with visibility, we do hope that with the easing, even reducing the cost of compliance, we do hope that we'll improve the level of compliance.
Do you have a sense in terms of, because KRA has previously engaged in mapping of the potential rental income, do you have a sense in terms of how many you're targeting to be on the system?
Not at the moment. Those are now numbers we are still working on. And remember, anytime you introduce something new, you might just have an estimate, but at least once you create a reasonable baseline, then we'll be able to have better visibility. We know that from conversations even with our principals, we've been informed that we are collecting just about a paltry 17%. Yeah, so it means we have a whole 83% to cover. When you move around the country, you can see a lot of rental property, but is it in our bracket? No.
Final question, Rispa, is that previously you were Commissioner for Domestic Taxes. You now lead large and medium-sized taxpayers. Are there any new initiatives, a new strategic approach that you are deploying in your new docket that will enable you now to unlock potentially what you haven't unlocked in the past with large and medium-sized?
Now, let me just create a picture of what large and medium taxpayers are. As I said earlier, large taxpayers office, medium taxpayers, and then the public sector. Just generally speaking, you'd say these are reasonably established businesses. Now, the large taxpayers, large LMT, actually accounts for 85% of the domestic taxes revenue. And as it is now, previously as domestic taxes accounted for 65%, whereas customs accounted for 35%. Yeah. Now, LMT, of that 65, LMT accounts for 56% of that revenue. So huge. Yeah. Now, looking at the percentage of this, actually those three are about 10,000 taxpayers out of that full lot of about 10 million plus who are active, much as we have much more in the system. So what are we doing differently? I would say that with a reduced scope, with a reduced portfolio, it means it has actually freed me up to focus more on these established businesses. I would say they might not have the similar challenges that the small micro would have, because in terms of systems, in terms of even access to to agents, I would say they actually have better access to agents. Their systems are more established, so visibility is there. So I would say they have probably unique needs based on the kind of businesses that they run. So I would say from where I sit, better focus, even better engagements, stakeholder engagements, because when you're talking about sector-based, think about just focusing on the public sector. What are the unique challenges with public sector? Reconciliation challenges, yeah? Payments of PAYE and suppliers directly and reflecting that on items. And what, I mean, yes, on ITAX, sorry. And what are we doing? We are also working on the integration of ITAX, IFMIS, HRIS, and the CBK system. So that is one thing we are very big on. As we speak now, I'm happy actually to say that is more or less as good as done. In the next one or so, I mean a couple of weeks, that will be rolled out. What will that do? It means where public sector initially paid, all made payments were made to CBK, and then we do the back-end reconciliation. And then for all public servants, you find that there are gaps in your ledger. That will become a thing of the past. So that is one place we are really pleased of the progress that has been made. For the large taxpayers and the medium, I'd say more focus, better engagements, and especially at my level, because if you realize there are so many taxpayers, you can only visit and engage with so many. But I think I would say maybe better focus, better engagement, stakeholder, tailored solutions to the needs of this particular lot of taxpayers.
Commissioner Rispa, unfortunately, we have to cut it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We have been having a conversation with the Commissioner in charge of large and medium-sized taxpayers, that is Rispa Simiyu, on a raft of issues. We could have gone on with this conversation, why not for my producer Agatha, who's nudging me on the time that we have spent here. We shall be touching base with the Revenue Authority a lot more, especially as we build up in the budget cycle, to bring you the latest as it unfolds, so stay tuned.